Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is hosted by Asher Agency, a full-service partner to clients nationwide. Asher's services include media planning, creative, digital and social, website development, public relations, printing and fulfillment, and more. Anything you need to connect with your prospects and tell your story. To learn more, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. Our guest is Natalija Trokic.
Good job.
Natalija, did I pronounce that right?
You did a wonderful
job. Because we've known each other how did we first meet?
You were my college professor.
Oh, wow.
At Indiana Tech.
That's right.
We won't say what year.
Okay. And it was a communication class?
I think I took two classes with you.
Okay.
Communications as well as marketing.
Okay.
Like 200 or something like that.
Okay. So I don't think I've ever had to master your last name, but we were talking before we hit record that you have a letter in your first name that isn't pronounced. There's a J in there, but it's Natalija. Mm-hmm. And then you have an H in your last name that is pronounced, but it's not part of the spelling.
Surprise.
So this is the most difficult thing I'm going to do all day is pronounce your name correctly. Oh. And hopefully I got it in the ballpark.
You did a wonderful job.
Well, thank you for being with us on the podcast. You have been a loyal listener, so I appreciate that. And as you know, as a loyal listener, we're going to talk about your career path. We're going to talk about the organization you work for and some of the work that you do. And then we'll get into some fun, quick hit questions. But I want to start with your career path because you've spent a lot of time in the banking world. But a quick glance at your LinkedIn profile tells me that that has not always been the career path that you were on. So looks like it started with healthcare. Mm-hmm. So tell me, if you don't mind, what you were thinking about when you first started thinking about careers. Where did you go from there, and when and why did you pivot?
Sure. So when I was in high school, Parkview was hitting the ground running and, mm-hmm. and accelerating on, growing at a very rapid pace.
Yep.
And everybody that I went to school with and all of my friends, we wanted to be nurses.
Yep.
So I actually got my CNA between sophomore and junior year of high school.
Oh, wow.
And it was like a summer program at Indiana, or at Ivy Tech, excuse me, mm-hmm. That I did. And then I was able to get a job at a nursing home as a CNA.
Okay.
So I worked there for 3 years. I was still on the nursing track, going to accepted into a program in college. Became a qualified medications aide, a QMA, just did some different stuff in there. And then one day, we were in a clinical class and we went out to Parkview with school, and just talking to some of the nurses and just talking about, I met a few folks that were maybe in their early 40s that mm-hmm. were talking about they needed a knee replacement.
Yeah.
They needed, just some of the wear and tear on them physically, emotionally, et cetera. And this is pre-COVID. Yeah. This is moons ago. Yeah. And just in talking to that, and I went home and I was talking to my mom, and I was like, I work a labor-intensive job at the time, right? Yeah. And I thought becoming an RN would kind of take me out of that, and working in a hospital setting would be different. And I just kind of learned the harsh reality of what these people go through. Yeah. And I've been lucky so many times in life. And talking to my mom and just kind of having some conversations with people that I trusted, I decided I didn't want to do nursing. I didn't know what I wanted to do specifically, but I knew that I didn't want to do nursing. So I pulled myself out of the program, enrolled just, I think, in business, mm-hmm. maybe in healthcare administration. Don't hold me to it.
Did I see a business school in Ohio on your resume?
You did. So I took a week off of work. I took a week of PTO to take a Series 6 and 7 class because that's what nerds do.
Well, I originally read it as the Honduras College of Business, and I was like, oh, she went to, and then I was like, no, I'm spelling that wrong.
No, so. How is it? I guess I don't know what
Honduras,
Honduras,
yeah. Let's call it that.
Let's do.
Now that we've said it on the podcast, it's official. That's their name.
That is what it's called in Independence, Ohio, specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
It was actually a class that was put on by State Farm.
Okay.
And as they're a license or their insurance company, they have a lot of different licensures. So it was a week-long program to prep you for those two courses.
Got it. But where you went to school then was Indiana Tech.
Correct. Okay. So I started off at St. Francis, and I ended up transferring to a finance degree because mm-hmm. my thought process was I like math and I'm good at it, so mm-hmm. this will fit. Yeah. And then I transferred to Indiana Tech, and I was talking to one of my professors. I was like, I need a job that is going to lead to a career path in business / mm-hmm. finance. Mm-hmm. And her recommendation was, and she's still teaching there, her recommendation was, have you considered banking? Mm-hmm. And so I went online and I banked at Wells Fargo at the time, and I was like, Wells Fargo's hiring for tellers and bankers. I shall go do that.
Okay, so you go into banking at Wells Fargo as a teller. What's that experience like?
Very different. So a little bit of background on me. I wasn't born here in the States. So there's a lot of things, even to this day, that I'm just learning about how things work.
When did you come to the States?
98.
And where from?
The former Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
So my family and I were refugees of war that were reconnected here in Fort Wayne, along with a bunch of other families in the late 90s.
Why Fort Wayne, if you don't mind my asking?
We did not pick. We could have picked, but when I think about my mom's story of it, she goes, what did I know about America other than what I saw in the movies and on a map? And she goes, when I saw it on the map, they showed me where Fort Wayne was, and it's in the middle. And she goes, well, the middle seems better than not the middle.
Okay. All right.
I say this all the time, just as a family, we've all been lucky with our decisions.
For sure.
A lot. But so it was a lot of learning, right? But I started to immediately just naturally gravitate towards talking to people. I just tell me about you. So full transparency, I reached out to you and asked if I could interview you for this podcast just to change it up.
And I said no, and I said, how about I interview you instead?
Yeah. It's a hard no, but that's okay. I'll get there. Well, I'll keep working on you. But no, I just got to immediately start working with people and having conversations, learning about what's important to them, and then learning about the banking industry. I don't think it's news to anyone that it's a little complex.
Yeah.
So just learning about how those things work. How does a bank work? I'm still learning, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And so just immediately really enjoyed that. But I wanted to move away. So I consider Fort Wayne home. I've been here since second grade. But I am what they call a boomerang. So I moved away, lived in Cleveland for about 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Worked with Wells Fargo there. They were really good to me. They let me travel and just kind of try out some different roles. So right out of college, I did asset recovery, which was just a really good learning about, again, talking to people in probably some of their worst positions in their lives. Yeah. And giving them tools to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, an asset recovery is a euphemism for repossession of assets. Yeah. Yeah. So a tough job, tough field to be in, but a huge learning experience.
I'd say I learned 90% of my core negotiation and just conversational skills and listening skills there.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I moved into indirect auto lending. So dealer finance, when you go to a dealership and you say, sure, run my credit and see what you get.
So people who are happier to hear from you when it's a decision being made about a car.
Yeah. They're like, we called it putting dreams in driveways.
Okay. Well, wow.
We had a tagline. It was a
putting
thing.
Dreams in driveways. Wow.
Okay. That hopefully is not, trademarked anywhere, but...
It's not the first mistake we've made on this episode.
It's not the first mistake.
We'll just keep going.
No, but I got a taste for relationship management and underwriting there. Definitely different than what I do today, but it was just interesting to see all the different things that my customer, who was a dealer at the time, not the end customer buyer, and then what the bank needed from them, right? So how many apps were we looking at? How many were we approving and booking, and how many were we approving and not booking?
Yeah. Were they bringing you the right customers? Yeah. Okay. So where do you go from there?
So from there, I decided I want to come back home.
Yeah. And why was that, if you don't mind my asking?
A little bit of growing up probably had something to do with it. A little bit of, I've owned a home since I was 19 here in Fort Wayne.
That's amazing.
Really lucky and just a lot of unfortunate circumstances that turned out good and just allowed me to be in that position at that time. But I wanted to come back essentially because I was ready to buy a house and I was living in Cuyahoga County, Cleveland area, very high taxes compared to here.
For sure.
And I grew up here. So for me, this is baseline. Yeah. I've learned later that this is an incredibly inexpensive place to live comparatively. But I didn't know that at the time, right? So I just wanted to come back. I wanted to come back home. I wanted to continue kind of putting my roots down without having to pay rent. And so I decided to move back and came back. And shortly after, still with Wells Fargo, got into the commercial side. So the process there for me and a couple other people that I have worked with before and kind of in my tenure was you sit as a credit analyst for a year and a half, 2 years, and you really get an understanding of the what the clients are looking for, what the bank is looking, how the bank can structure it, and just kind of some of the different parts and pieces of putting one of these deals together. Yeah. So I did that for a little bit, and then I stepped into what's referred to now as an associate role. So like a junior banker. Yeah. So I had, a little bit of responsibility, few clients, worked with bankers very closely on everything that they were working on versus sitting kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I will say my time in those two roles was probably the toughest that I've had from a career standpoint. It was just a lot of learning. I didn't know a lot. And again, a lot of it stems back to there's just a lot you don't know when you don't grow up in the U.S. There's still things that I'm like, oh, that's how that's done.
Yeah.
And they're like, how'd you think it was done? I'm like, I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a thing.
Or people who grew up in the U.S. have this false confidence that they pretend that they know when they really don't.
I'll tell you, as someone who didn't know it, it's not false confidence. I mean, it's information that I think maybe, even I today take things for granted that I know.
Sure.
But, in working now, I get to work with some associates and analysts that are coming up now. And I think something that I really, really try to instill in them is even when you're talking to somebody, whatever it is that they're an expert in, they learned it. They took the time, they dedicated it. Other people put time into them learning it, helping them guide them. So even if you're talking to someone who is, I never want to be the smartest person in the room, I want to talk to that person. But I want to know not just about what they know and how smart they are. I want to know how they got there.
Yeah, interesting. So talk us through, bridge us from where you've taken us so far to where you are today.
So I ended up promoting through the program at Wells Fargo and became a full-fledged banker. This was, unfortunately, from a timing perspective, shortly before they sold their retail business and a part of the rest of their Indiana-based business to another bank. I was in the commercial bank, so we were not part of that. But the reality is that I lost a huge chunk of my book from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah.
And it was just at that point that I decided, okay, I'd spent almost a decade there. I'd really grown up there. Wonderful people that I'm still very close to. But it was just time to try something else and see if I can hack it elsewhere. So since then, I spent some time at JP Morgan Chase, at Fifth Third, and then in April of 2023, I'm really excited to have joined First Merchants Bank.
Okay, so let's talk about First Merchants. For those who may be unfamiliar with that name or less familiar with it, how do you define the place where you work? When people ask you, what's First Merchants, what do you say in response?
So what I would say First Merchants is, first and foremost, is a commercial bank. So something to each bank, and just like any business, even if it's in the same industry, a competitor of yours, right? They kind of have something that they focus on. Some banks will focus on mortgage and savings, right? Some folks will focus on the investment side. And we are a, first and foremost, fully fledged commercial bank. So that means that is where a lot of our, not all, but a lot of our time and attention is spent, right? And then obviously we have the ancillary supports to support those individuals and businesses, et cetera. But I would say that's probably the first place I would start. Secondly, I'd probably highlight one of the things that I'm learning a lot about the bank and that I'm really excited about and proud of is that we are a regional bank. And what I've learned over the last few years of just being a professional in the industry and COVID and all the things that has taught us and is still teaching and is yet to teach us, is that it's very important to know the bank that you're working for and working with from a client perspective, because it's important to understand where they prioritize their time and where they want their employees to prioritize their time. So as a regional bank, so we've grown pretty quickly through acquisition, born and raised in Indiana. We're a $20 billion asset size bank almost. And our focus is to serve the immediate communities that we work in. Now, obviously, I will tell you, I have said that and I meant it every single time. And I know other great folks do for the companies that they work for. But the reality is some of these large organizations do have to spread the love. Sure. Because they're everywhere. And, being that we're not everywhere, that we are in Indiana, Fort Wayne is kind of quickly becoming our unofficial regional headquarters just because we made an acquisition in Michigan. There's a lot of conversations that I'm privy to that I've never been privy to before, just because it's a collapsed organizational chart. And I mean, my first week there, our bank president came up and had lunch with me. I've never had that, and I'm not new to the career or the industry. Yeah, for sure. So that that instills a lot of confidence in me, and it allows me to go out and have conversations with people that I feel comfortable in what I can get done, what I can say will I'll be able to execute on, and the bank will be behind me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
Really, really cool organization.
So let's talk about the role you're in today and the team you work with. Help us understand your place in the organization and who you're working alongside.
So in our office, we have your commercial relationship manager, sales side, frontline, if you will. So that's myself. Report up to Jamie Matthews, our market president. Along with that, we have our credit team. So we have credit manager. We have analysts. We have some analysts that are, I would call it just that's kind of their career, and that's where they plan to stay. And then we have some folks that are moving through that career path, if you will. Okay. We additionally have an associate, Hezekiah Russell, that I've really enjoyed working with. And in addition to them, we have private bank, treasury management support, merchant services, et cetera, wealth, trust, and so on and so forth. My kind of where I fit into that is I was brought on to have a small book of business just to understand how the bank works, make sure I understand how to manage clients, click the right buttons, do the right things that need to be done in a timely manner. And then to grow the business. So we are a growth mode bank. We've been really excited to not necessarily have to slow down as the economy's been a little unpredictable. Is a good way to say. And so we get to pull some of the best minds, in my opinion, not just in the company but in the region together and work on deals. That can include the private bank side. You know, I had somebody that I was prospecting for years and years and years, and shared my prospect list with our private bank, and one of the gentlemen goes, "Oh, I was neighbors with the owner for 6 years." Yeah, took him out to the first meeting. They talked for 45 minutes. Yeah, we got a word in eventually 2-hour meeting, but it couldn't have started better. Yeah, and that's the power of the team.
Well, and it's one of the advantages of working in a market the size of Fort Wayne is everybody knows everybody. So easy to connect those dots.
It is very true. Yeah, it is very true.
So obviously you can't share anything proprietary, and there's a lot of that in the banking business. But what are some of the things you're focused on these days? What are some of the things that are taking up most of your time and attention?
I would say so. When I think about the kind of business that I go after, there's some specialization in kind of in what you do if you want there to be, right? Yeah. So my experience and fascination is probably a better way to put it. Has been in just kind of industrial manufacturing. That's really those are the kinds of businesses I understand. I understand the accounting. I understand the assets. I see how it moves on paper and in my head and in the conversation. Yeah. So that's where I focus on. I'm really looking forward to, I have a couple of really, really exciting names that I have proposals out to, and I hope to hear back from and have, fingers crossed, a really nice first quarter. And outside of me having a nice first quarter, I really want them to have a good experience. So we put a really good team of people around them, and my job is to manage that whole team, right? So my job is to kind of have those conversations with the prospective borrower, understand where they're going, where they want to go, and pull in those partners. So my role is really to have that relationship, build that trust, so they're comfortable calling me just like they are comfortable calling their VP and saying, "Hey, this is the problem that I'm in, and I need you to come up with a solution by Tuesday." Thanks. Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate goal is if I can be considered essentially as one of the unpaid C-suite folks for one of my clients, that's my ultimate goal. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I've always, we've stayed in touch somewhat on and off over the years is you're someone I think of, it's like, even if she's not the person who can solve the problem, she can connect me to someone who can solve the problem, which is a skill unto itself.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, it's an interesting thing because it is a skill. Yeah. Somehow I like learning about people, right? Like, I don't know how to do it, but Anthony does, call him. Yeah. And if he doesn't, he'll know someone in the industry. Sure. So what was it about manufacturing that kind of piqued your interest? Is that just where you've had your experience, or is there something else that makes that an area of focus? Ironically, had this conversation with my associate, I think earlier today. It's the kind of people. For me, these conversations and these relationships that we build, it's not about a customer switching banks. It's not about me having a good quarter or the bank posting great results. What that is about is generally, especially in our area, you've got family-owned businesses, first, second, third, fourth, X generation. That's theirs. And I take that incredibly seriously. Yeah. And then in addition to that, when people say like, well, it makes you lose sleep at night. I don't lose sleep at night very often unless it comes to an issue with processing payroll. Because if you're talking about a business, a local business that has 50 to 100 employees, and if something happens and that payroll doesn't go out the way it's supposed to, that's when I lose sleep. Because then you have kids that aren't going to eat over the weekend. You have child support that's not going to be paid, and someone's going to go to jail. And these are all things that I think about because my family's been short and low on cash and needed all the support and services, and there was no time and no gap available to fix any kind of error. That's what it is for me. So I really enjoy just kind of the folks that I've gotten to work with in manufacturing, generally those family-owned businesses. They're a little bit more laid back. I tease a little bit. I like to work with the kind of people that you can kind of kick back with, have a conversation with, have a laugh with. Because if you can do that and you can find a way to connect in that, I think that carries tremendously through tough conversations or tough periods, whether it's for the bank, for the client, for whoever.
Yeah, and I think it's really just a stylistic difference. I mean, I've said to people before, if you want someone who's super formal and super corporate, I'm probably not the person you want to work with.
Me either.
Right, and I'm okay with that. It's kind of like, especially as you get a little older, you realize you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So knowing that you like to work with someone who's going to be a little bit more themselves, I think it's helpful when you're trying to decide where am I going to be of the most help to someone.
So interesting. Let me ask a question to you. So do you think that's a confidence that you grew into through experience, through trial and error, through as far as kind of, I pick in industrial manufacturing because that's what I know. But I also have just kind of figured out that that's kind of the more laid back folks that I like to work with. That's a confidence I kind of came into, woke up with one day and realized, I kind of have known that all along. What about you?
I think it's something I came back to, right? When I started my career, I was like, a lot of this formality is super weird to me and I don't get it and I don't like it, but it seems like everyone else is doing it, so I have to. And then after a while, I was like, there's people who aren't that way, and the people I tend to get along the best are those people. And it's not to say bad things about people who are very formal and are very corporate. I was just like, it's not for me. And there's probably people who are very much that way. And the world is big enough. There's tons of opportunity out there. It's kind of like, I think I can be of best service to people who like a little whimsy in their work, right? And that's what I try to do. I mean, I take the work I do really seriously, but I have never for one day taken myself super seriously and can't. So some of it was I wasn't doing very well when I was trying to fake it. And now that I'm in an environment, thank you, Asher Agency, that allows me to be more myself, and it just works better. So some of it is learning that confidence over time, but some of it is kind of trusting that your wiring is different than everyone else's, and that can be a strength or a weakness. If you leverage it in the right way, it's a strength.
You're absolutely on the nose with that. So something that I think our market president, Jamie, has done a really nice job of is putting a team together that we don't look like each other. We look like the market we're serving. We look like the customers we want to work with. We don't look like I don't mean look physically, right? But we just don't, we're not the same kind of people. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've had just some awesome conversations where we're pulling bankers in that they're not going to get any credit or anything out of it, but we're all putting ideas together. And I mean, it's fascinating and awesome just to see how these ideas come together and how things are put together with just bunch of different ideas.
Well, and it's one of the things I mentioned, Asher has really given me the latitude to kind of bring more of myself to work in hopefully a productive way. One of the reasons that's true, and I say this to prospective new hires, I say the great thing about working at Asher is you can be yourself. The challenge is everyone else is too, and you have some big personalities. You have a wide variety of personalities. Basically, any personality type you want, you're going to get it, and in some cases, it's going to be pretty unfiltered. If you like that, you're going to thrive here. If you want it to be more monochrome, this probably isn't the place for you. And that's been, we hire people who are good humans first, who are curious, who like to learn and teach what they know, and who are great marketers kind of third. But we also look for personality, and and we get it. And that as you mentioned, I think in your experience is generally a good thing if the culture and environment is built to support that.
Yeah. It just personally for me, right? Like you said, I mean, it would be weird if we were all the same. Could you imagine? It would be so boring. I wouldn't want to be here.
Well, and, some of it is I feel really fortunate to be working at this time in the world because I'm like, oh, things have relaxed a little bit. And, some of the things that we used to do that didn't make a lot of sense have kind of gone by the wayside, in part because of the pandemic and other technology changes. So I think some of it is, as you alluded to, some of it for me has just been dumb luck of being born at the right time.
And I would say the same for me, right? I mean, some of it I think is how you look at it.
Yeah.
Some of the struggles that I've had, they sucked. They're terrible.
Oh, yeah.
For my family, for me personally,
for sure.
Career, personal, however you want to look at it, right? Yeah. But those are the same experiences and things that I got through that made me who I am today.
100%.
And I kind of I like me.
Yeah.
There's things I'm working on, but I like me for the most part. And I think, I think having that realization and being able to see that about myself also allows me to give grace to people who, maybe I'm not in the best mindset and they're coming as their authentic selves. And it just kind of knowing that about myself and seeing it allows me to just give that grace to others too.
Well, you can see yourself in that person, right? I've been through a lot of stuff myself, and usually when you're seeing people at their worst, it's an anomaly, it's an outlier. And there's a lot of times I can say, yeah, I don't like that you feel that way or act in that way, but I've been that person, and I think the world could use a lot more of that empathy. And I don't always have it, but I try.
I have extra empathy, I'm being told. So I'll give you some.
Okay.
I have some to spare.
There are days I can need it. Wow, we're getting really high-minded and on a super productive tangent here. This is good. Okay. But I'm going to reel us back in and put us back on track. All right. So let's pivot to some of the more quick hit questions. And you may have alluded to some of these answers, but to get it on the nose, I want to first hear about your best career advice. You're in a relationship business. You've obviously done a good job of building relationships. But beyond that, what would you recommend for someone to focus on if they wanted to have a successful and fulfilling career? What do you think is most important?
Regardless of what that career is, for me, when I started figuring out what it is that I care about, what it is that I want to do, when I started doing it being anything, right? So for me, it was banking, right? Yeah. So I sat in retail, and then I went here, and then I went there, and then I did this, and then I sat in credit, and then whatever, right? Today, I am exactly where I need to be. And I think it's just doing it. I think it's getting into it, actually committing. If you're committing to something, I think you have to go in and give it your all. Yeah. And in the beginning, you got to give it more. You got to give it some of those extra hours. You got to kind of earn your stripes, which is it's a cringe thing to say, but it's true. You kind of do. And I think just doing it, and then while you're doing it, not being dismissive of anything, whether it's, hey, I don't like how this process is, and this process is a fault of this or that or you or whoever, but just not being dismissive of that, but having a conversation about it, right? Because when you're young and new and learning about an industry or career, it's easy to be like, oh, well, that's not necessary. It's dumb. It's annoying. But you haven't done it for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
So if it's frustrating or if it's causing enough, whatever it is that's slowing you down or taking away from the focus that you're supposed to be of just doing whatever that is, it's kind of not having the fear of asking a question. Yeah. I will tell you, I built a career on saying I don't know and asking questions.
Yeah, for sure.
And figuring it out and getting back to people, but not being afraid to ask why. Why is this like this? Because maybe there's a method to the madness that I don't see yet because I haven't done it long enough.
Well, and maybe there isn't, and the organization just hasn't realized that. I think that the key is asking the question. I think you point to something really important. I always say, from a leadership standpoint, sometimes you got to tell people not just what you need from them, but why it matters. The flip side of that, what you're getting at, is sometimes you shouldn't just ask, what do I need to do, but why is it important? The folks who are right down the hall from us right now on our finance team, I drive them nuts because I am definitely more creative-minded, English major, and the math scares me. But there are times when they do a great job of reminding me, hey, we're asking you to do this, and here's why it matters. I'm much more motivated to do it than if it just seems like bureaucratic bullshit, right? So I think from the other side of that is asking, why are we doing it this way? And I'm not asking that as a challenge question. I just want to understand. And, there are times when I first started here at Asher, one of the best mentors I've ever had, Tim Borney, the founder of the company, when we would sit down to do billing, it was literally pencil and paper. And one day I was like, can we use Excel for this? Because I'm going to make, my handwriting is atrocious and yours, Tim, isn't much better. We're going to have fewer errors if we do it this way, and it's going to do some of the hard work for us. He was just old school and had always done it that way, and no one had ever, well, I'm sure somebody else had questioned it, but I tend to be a little more forceful. So, it seems like a good question that made my job easier and ultimately led to a better result. So yes, ask questions for sure, but be open to finding out there's a good reason for you being asked to do things that maybe you don't love doing.
Absolutely. And I think you point to something else too. I think as I'm kind of developing in my career and kind of stepping into more mentorship, leadership type of responsibilities and roles, it's on us and me and you as a VP here. It's on us to remember that when we get those why questions, they're not a challenge.
Yeah.
And sometimes the ego gets in the way.
Oh, for sure.
Love that ego just comes out in the most inopportune times. But it's like, the person that's asking a question, if it's a why just to ask you because they're irritated with the process and want to pass some of that along to you, okay. But if it's genuinely someone who doesn't know, take the time.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know it until somebody explained it to you.
Yeah. That's really good advice. All right. Second quick hit question. What is a myth or misconception about the work that you do? That could be the world of banking. It could be the work specifically you do in relationship building, in sales. What is something that you think is either underappreciated and deserves to be amplified or is misunderstood and deserves to be corrected?
I would like to answer on behalf of the entire banking industry as a whole.
Okay.
Just kidding. I think what I've learned is that banks, just like anyone or anything else, go through their business cycles. Mm-hmm. And when we are looking at specifically commercial deals, these are long-term relationships, 20-year amortizations. Just these are in-depth things, right? We're together for the long haul, at least at some capacity.
Yeah.
Banks and as well as businesses change their risk appetite. Mm-hmm. So there are times where, and it's not a comfortable conversation to have, but that when you're talking to when I'm talking to a prospective client, and it's like, hey, I hear what you're saying, and I understand the industry, or I understand enough about the industry that you're in to understand it's not going to fit in our wheelhouse. Yeah. Now, we can beat it and bruise it and shove it into something to make it. Yeah. But in a year and a half, it's not going to be what the client wants or needs. Yeah. We're not necessarily going to maybe be able to grow with them because it's not an industry we understand. And there is a reason that, there used to be, 17,000 banks in the 80s in the U.S. Now we're down to 4,600, shy of 5,000. There's still plenty of banks out there, and we compete because it makes us better for our customers. And I think that is something, the relationships are key, and I want people that I work with to stay with me and work with me. But if the bank that I'm working for is no longer the right fit for what they need, I think that's an okay conversation to have. But I think that takes a certain level of relationship as well. Yeah. So let me ask a follow-up question. This may be the most difficult question I'm going to ask you. So despite all the consolidation, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, it seems like the banking world in Northeast Indiana has gotten super competitive super recently. Is that true? And if so, why is that? Is it because it's a growth market? What's happening? And you can say, I don't know. Well, I can tell you I've been competing. Yeah. We've all been competing. Yeah. I think what the difference is, and I'm going to try to go through this lightly, but I think we're seeing that if you talk about, we're going to go global economics, talk about reshoring, right? So bringing some of that manufacturing back, right? Where does manufacturing live? Here. Yeah. Midwest. So you have that focus, right, from a federal government level. Then you have state and other municipalities kind of funding different grants, programs over the last probably 10 years. More recently, a lot more. But there's a lot of support around these businesses. We want them to flourish. We want them to grow. We want them to update technology. And when they do that, when these businesses get better, faster, stronger, smarter, we have to do the same. Yeah. And it forces us to compete. So I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, if you're talking to someone else, if you tell me that, obviously I'm going to be on higher alert at that point. But I don't know if I'm not competitive until you tell me. Yeah. Right. So that, again, it's that relationship. It takes some time to get there, but it's worth getting there if you can. I think the customers are making us more competitive. I think there's just access to more information online. People can get educated. They can ask deeper questions, and there are more From a technology standpoint, technology gets cheaper as it's on market, right? If you think about from a penetration standpoint, when there's something new and fancy, it's at the top.
Yeah.
That's who gets it first.
Yeah.
Whether that you're a business or you're an individual or whatever, you're at the top. You get to see it first. You'll pilot it. You'll see its benefits, whatever. There's a lot of technology that's trickled down that can be utilized by small business.
Yeah.
And I think, in our market, we are Northeast Indiana. We're not Silicon Valley. We're not the East Coast. But there's a lot of tools that the bankers here in Northeast Indiana, good old folks like you and I, have access to that we need to talk about more. We need to get these tools, we need to expose our clients to them because they're good for them.
Yeah.
They are tools that are now being used at a lower volume. So they're more readily available by more banks to more clients. And I think all of that is forcing us to be more competitive, have better, deeper relationships, have better, deeper understanding of our clients. And then also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our regulators. Our regulators do whether you're a national bank, regional bank, et cetera, they do kind of force, rightfully so, unfortunately, because we've had some bad actors, they do force a little bit of an even playing field.
Yeah.
And that, I think, forces all of us to be sharper.
Yeah.
And better for our clients. I think competition's healthy.
Yeah. Well, that was a really good answer to a question that I dropped on you out of nowhere. And it's funny, as you mentioned that, I'm thinking about why I originally went with the very large, otherwise to be unnamed bank that I'm with. It was because they had this revolutionary thing at the time where I could take a photo of my check and deposit it, which has become...
When was the last time you did that?
Oh, like literally yesterday. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's writing you a check?
I get I don't know, I get paper checks every now and then. But yeah.
Scary.
But at the time it was like, oh, they have this and no one else does. And now kind of everyone does. So, it's no longer differentiated, but as you know, banks are sticky. So
we're good at that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Last quick hit question. And this has to do with the work that you do and the way that you do it. Speaking of tools, you just mentioned tools, what is a tool, and it could be analog, it could be digital, that you use at work that helps you get the job done, that's important to you, that you think deserves a mention?
Sure. Not for any particular app or anything, but I am a big fan of taking handwritten notes.
Okay.
So prior to nursing school and all of that, I was going to be a war correspondent and I was going to study political journalism or political science and journalism at IU.
Okay.
So I've always enjoyed writing.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of notes, helps me remember. I think there's science behind that. But then retyping my notes is tedious. It takes time. I can't always read my handwriting. I write in the margin or whatever.
Yeah.
The bank, we use a lot of different Microsoft products, so it's within the suite.
Yeah.
Microsoft Lens lets me take a picture of notes, and it'll transcribe them. It'll email them to me, depending on the software, and sometimes it'll upload it to CRM, depending on what it is. It's not perfect. If I write in the margin and scratch stuff out, I have to go in and retype it and clean it up. But
how bad is your handwriting on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being illegible and 1 being it looks like typing?
So 1 is good, 10 is bad. You threw me.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know, like a 3. I mean, it's not bad.
All
it's legible, but
mine's
sometimes
like a 9 where I can't even read it most of the time. So,
but you'd be surprised. Microsoft Lens I've used just because banks use Microsoft a lot, and it's part of the protected portal or whatever. It's my biggest thing is when I cross something out or you go back and mention something that's related to the note I took up here, I'll write it at the side.
Okay.
But if I just snap a photo, it'll do the typing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I use Evernote as when I handwrite notes, I'll take a photo of it. And what I like about it is, to the extent that my handwriting will let this happen, it's searchable, but I haven't seen the ability to transcribe it. So Microsoft Lens, I'm going to have to check this out.
Yep.
This is the whole reason I do this podcast, is to learn new things. So there's my idea.
There you go, Microsoft Lens. It's
awesome.
It's probably built into whatever you already have.
It very well may be. All right. Well, I learned something new today. I didn't know it was going to be that, but I'm glad that we talked.
Great.
Well, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you very much for having me. It has been fun reconnecting and being less afraid of a microphone.
Okay, good. Well, that's the goal. Hopefully you're not more afraid as a result of having this in.
No, thank you very much.
All right, good. And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.